Hello and welcome to the Asian Game here at the FIFA Women's World Cup, where again all of our coverage is proudly sponsored by our good friends at SMC. Paul Williams, alongside the coach of the Adelaide United women's team, Adrian Stenta, come down to Central Market again, one of my favourite spots in Adelaide. Adrian, thanks very much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you back on. Last time we had you on the show, I think was Australia had just played the one game by that stage, the first up win against the Republic of Ireland. We spoke about sort of, I guess, what we wanted this tournament to leave in terms of legacy and what we expected from this tournament. I think it's fair to say it's gone even probably beyond our wildest expectations what's happened to this tournament. The Matildas making it as far as they have. It's literally stopped the country in a lot of ways. How have you seen the tournament travelling around and the impact that it's had?
Yeah, I think it's been fantastic. It's been a real roller coaster, to be honest. Since that last conversation, we've had all range of emotions. You know, the disappointment of the result against Nigeria, the resounding victory against Canada, one of the strongest teams in the world, and then everything that's flowed from there. So it's great that Australia have been able to go deep into the tournament, and we've been treated to some fantastic matches and some extra time and penalty shootouts across the board. So yeah, it's been great.
You mentioned roller coaster and penalty shootouts there, so let's get on to talking about that. The shootout the other night, Australia against France, one of the most dramatic that you're ever likely to see. I'm sure you've been involved in some penalty shootouts as a coach and a player, but probably none like that. Where were you watching it, and how were you experiencing it and taking it in as a fan watching it on?
Yeah, I was watching it in my living room with my family, my two daughters and my wife, and we had some friends around as well. Ended up turning into a bit of a long night because we stayed and watched the second game. But yeah, I found for some reason, and I'm not sure why, but I couldn't sit still. So I was generally walking around, pacing around, and at one point there it looked like neither team wanted to win it. And then, yeah, I was fortunate enough the next morning to wake up and see my daughters had woken up early in the morning and had put the penalty shootout back on TV and were watching the replay. So it was great to see them, doing that off their own bat and how invested they were in it as well.
That's the powerful impact that this tournament is having, isn't it? Because we're seeing those scenes replicated right across the country. Girls, boys, investing in and becoming fans of this team. Take us into the mind of a coach in that situation. We saw Tony Gustafsson on the sidelines. What would he have been feeling in that moment? Because as a coach, you like to control everything, but in that moment, you have no control over anything. Take us into the mind of a coach and what you think he would have been feeling in that moment.
Yeah, obviously he would have felt the full range of emotions, but I have heard him speak since the penalty shootout, and it sounds like they went in with a very clear plan, just like they would tactically for a game, about what they wanted to do, who was going to take the penalties, and they were very thorough with that. So he would have just been, focusing on, it sounds a bit boring, but sticking to the process and letting the plans that they've laid out in practice take care of themselves.
The whole idea of planning for these things is that so you do feel comfortable in those situations. When you've been in those situations yourself, how comfortable do you feel in that situation, knowing that you've done all the planning and the preparation that you do? Do you still feel comfortable, or do you feel a sense of edginess in that situation?
Yeah, I can only talk from a personal experience, and I never really feel comfortable as a coach because, at least as a player, you feel like you can step out onto the park and have some sort of impact on the result and on your team. As a coach, really, the majority of your work is done during the week and in preparation for games. And so, yeah, 90 minutes is usually a roller coaster, and it's usually a period of uncomfortableness for me for the whole time.
And how did you see the match overall? It finished 0-0, but I mean, either side could have won it in regulation time. It was a match that really neither side deserved to lose. It was harsh on France to lose in those circumstances because they were brilliant. As a coach, how did you see the match? When you're watching a match, do you watch it from a tactical point of view, or are you watching purely as a fan? How did you see it?
I'd love to be able to watch it purely as a fan, but I find it difficult to switch my coach's brain off. And yeah, I think that match in itself was a microcosm of what the whole tournament has been for Australia. So I thought they started a bit slowly, but were able to work their way back into the game. France started quite strongly. Australia probably had the better of the last sort of 10-15 of the first half, and then at different times during the second half and extra time, both teams had chances and had the ascendancy. So yeah, it was a really up and down game that had its ebbs and flows. And you're right, either result. Like if France had won, I don't think anyone would have begrudged them the victory either. So I'm just glad Australia got through and they've got another chance to play in a semi-final now.
Yeah, and that semi-final against England on Wednesday night. We're speaking here on the Tuesday, so what's that? Probably about 36 hours to go and until that one. We look ahead to that now. How do you think the Matildas are placed going into that game against England?
I think they'll be, sky high on confidence. They know that they've got the full support of everyone in Australia, the whole community, not just the people that support our code, but you've got other codes getting on board. You've got, other players from other codes and politicians and the general public. So I think they'll really be riding that wave of support and emotion, and they'll be feeling confident. And I think that they believe internally that they're as good a chance as anyone to knock off England.
Absolutely. Let's hope they do. I'll come back to you in a moment, Adrian. We've seen women's football blossom and bloom over the last couple of years, but how has it blossomed and bloomed in Asia? I had the great chance of speaking to the Player and Union Relations Manager from FIFA, Shoko Tsuji, just recently, and I spoke to her about how she's seen the tournament and development of women's football in Asia. Well, Shoko, thanks very much for joining us here on the Asian Game. It's a pleasure to have you on the show after what was a momentous night for Australian football last night with that big win over France. We're just talking off air. Unfortunately, it wasn't a case that it was a perfect weekend for our teams. Unfortunately, Japan didn't make it through, but we'll get on to talking about that in a little bit. I just wanted to start with a little bit of an introduction, if we can, a basic introduction for those listeners and viewers of ours that perhaps aren't familiar with who you are and your work with FIFPro. Can you just give them a little bit of an introduction as to your background in the game and your role within FIFPro as well?
Thank you, Paul. And first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here on one of my favorite podcasts. I'm Shoko, originally from Japan. So I grew up watching football. My favorite team is Yokohama F. Marinos. So the J League really got me interested in football. But then I moved to Europe shortly after completing my studies. I did 5 years in Spain working for the official broadcaster of La Liga. I did a few other jobs in media. And a year and a half ago, I joined FIFPro. For those of you who aren't familiar with the organization, we are the global union representing professional football players worldwide. So we represent more than 65,000 players around the world. And my role specifically is in player relations. So what I'm trying to do is create a network of players, international players, with whom we can work together. And every day we're trying to get feedback from them, involve them in our projects, and through them try to improve the lives of football players around the world.
Well, when you put it like that, it seems like a bit of a daunting task when you mention those numbers, 65,000 players around the world, each, of course, with their own unique circumstances, unique environments that they're working and playing in as well. So I certainly don't envy you there. We'll focus on the women's game because we're here at the Women's World Cup. But we look back over the last few years, there's been a huge boom. We've mentioned it throughout the last couple of weeks, a huge boom in women's football, particularly in Europe since the last World Cup in France in 2019. So working where you are at FIFPro, how have you seen that boom and the rise in women's football that we've seen over the last few years?
Yeah, it's been impressive. I also played football when I lived in Japan. So I've seen, for example, in Japan, how the league has gone from a semi-professional league to a professional league, the WE League. And I think that's also kind of the reason why women's football has developed so much around the world, that we're seeing more professional leagues around the world where players can focus full time on playing. Their conditions have improved dramatically, their salaries as well. And as FIFPro, what we try to do is focus on what we can do at a global scale to improve the players' conditions. So talking about this tournament specifically, we've been in negotiations with FIFA months before the tournament, trying to improve the conditions. So trying to equalize what the men had in Qatar, and make sure that those conditions were available here in Australia and New Zealand as well. We've also managed to increase the prize money threefold from the previous tournament. We're still not at equal prize money, but FIFA have said that would be possible in the next tournament. And then we've also guaranteed a portion of that prize money going to players directly, which for us is really important because even though we've made huge strides in the women's game, there's still a lot of room for improvement. Our survey results tell us that only 40% of the players going into this tournament consider themselves professional. So I think there's still a lot of work we need to do, but we're trying to prioritize because it is a daunting task, as you say, and focus on what it is that we can influence.
You kind of touched on it a little bit there. As the women's game sort of professionalizes around the world, that throws up its sort of its own unique challenges, I guess, in a way, as the game comes to terms with that professionalisation and the challenge of pay and conditions in comparison to the men's game as well. So over those last couple of years, as I said, as the women's game has professionalised in more substantial numbers around the world, what are the challenges that you're coming across with FIFPro in terms of that professionalisation that, as I said, that you're aware of and you're trying to get on top of?
Yeah, I think. Well, the positive note is that players are feeling more confident to speak up about their conditions. They know that they're entitled to rights, and we've seen a lot of players, putting out statements. A lot of teams before the World Cup, during the World Cup. And I think that goes to show that they know that they're entitled to these rights. Where we also see more and more players coming to us with their issues, also even in countries in Asia where they're not used to speaking out. So that's a positive, but we also need to make sure that we protect them, because if 2 or 3 players speak out, it's quite easy for the federation to take them out of the squad. But if they come to us as a collective, then that's when we can drive change together. So I think that's where we're here, because we have the expertise. We know how to get things over the line while protecting the players. So those are the challenges we're seeing. But yeah.
Yeah, and if we look at it from an Asian point of view, the performances of Asian teams at this World Cup, by and large, has been mostly disappointing, despite the fact that Australia and Japan made the quarterfinals. Of course, Australia is still in the tournament as well. But by and large, I think the performances of China and Korea, the 2 finalists at the last Asian Cup, underwhelmed. So as Asian football itself tries to grapple with how it tries to keep pace with the rate of change in women's football around the world, and the sort of lack of professional opportunities there are on this side of the world. There's only a handful of actual full professional leagues here within Asia. What does Asia need to do in order to keep pace with Europe and North America when it comes to women's football?
Yeah, I think there was a time when we were kind of considered, compared to men's football, we were ahead of the game. We were very competitive, and it's great to see Australia in the semifinals, and Japan. Yeah, they were eliminated in the quarterfinals. But still, when you look at it as a collective, when you look, for example, out of the 5 teams that qualified, only 2 made it to the final stages of the tournament. And then you see continents like Africa, where out of the 4, 3 qualified. So I think it shows that there's still a lot of room for improvement. As you say, there are very few professional leagues in Asia. So if you look at the Matildas, most of the players play either in Europe or the US, and we saw the same in Japan as well. Like, we had, I think, 9 players playing outside of Japan. That was a lot higher than the previous tournament, but it kind of seems that in order for the national team now to be competitive in Asia, it's a matter of more and more players playing outside of their countries, which makes sense when you look at what's happening, but it also shows that there's not really a pathway in Asia yet. I think it's great to see that there are 2 professional leagues in Japan, Australia, but what happens when you become the champions of those 2 countries? There isn't a club competition like we see in Europe. I know there are talks about it happening relatively soon, but the lack of pathways makes it more difficult for players to stay in Asia. So I think those are the challenges we're seeing. And it is good to see countries like Philippines, Vietnam, that we never saw before. I think the win that Philippines made over New Zealand. That will really, yeah, it must have inspired the whole nation, and I'm sure a lot of young kids were looking at the game. But still, the reality is that many of those players play overseas. So I think we also need to think about how can we develop players within Asia as well.
And if we look at your home country, Japan, of course, take it back to 2011, they were champions of this competition, made the final 4 years later as well. Many people fancied them in this tournament until that loss against Sweden as well. But how have you seen the development of women's football in Japan over that last decade or so? Of course, it took them until a full decade later, 2021, for them to actually get their first professional league in the WE League, which seems an inordinate amount of time to get that off the ground. And you listen to some of the comments from players and people involved in the women's game in Japan. I think of someone like Yuki Nagasato, who's been very vocal about this on social media. There seems to be like a regret that not enough was done to fully capitalise on that success in 2011. So if we take it back to then through until now, how have you seen the development of women's football within Japan?
Yeah, I think the 2011 was a historic moment for us. I remember that day as if it were yesterday, especially in the moment that we were right after the earthquake and tsunami. And I really think that was the moment where if we had capitalized it, if we had created a professional league in that moment, it would have been a completely different story. But unfortunately, we did enjoy a few years of a lot of popularity in women's football. I remember the attendances of the domestic leagues were really high. There were broadcasters fighting for the right sponsors, and you could see the Nadeshiko Japan players on TV being invited to all these programs. But then I think, yeah, there was just a lack of investment, and Japan failed to qualify for the Rio Olympics, and then slowly the focus went to other sports, because Japan as a country, we do have a lot of sports competing, even within football itself. Like men's football is also very popular. We have baseball and then all the other sports. So it does seem like culturally we get really passionate about something, but we also lose interest quite quickly. So that's why I'm really hoping that the hype that's been created with Nadeshiko Japan's performance this tournament, it stays and we don't make the same mistake that we did before. Luckily, we do already have a professional league in place, so that should help. But we have made mistakes in the past, and I think that we need to see more investment. For example, not all the J League clubs have women's teams yet. We're actually missing quite a lot of the big clubs, like Marinos, like Gamba, that are missing women's clubs, and also, yeah, it's just so easy for us to move to the next thing in Japan, to the Rugby World Cup or the J League. But we've seen some amazing performances from the team this tournament, so I really hope that all the stakeholders involved will continue investing in the game.
So on the back of this tournament and then the relative success that Japan did have, do you expect to see any flow on any kind of investment that you were talking about? Do you expect to see that follow on the back of this? As it may have only been a quarter final, but I think it was the performances as much as the results that seem to sort of capture the imagination. We've seen a couple of years of the WE League now going into its third season, I think it is, this season. Do you expect to see that further investment that it needs and that you would like it to have in order to develop to the point that we think it should be?
I would like to be optimistic. I like even just looking at the number of people who were tuning into the games from Japan. I could see that there was a lot of interest that wasn't there before. This year, leading into the World Cup, the lack of awareness that this tournament was coming up, it was quite shocking for me. And the broadcaster, for example, wasn't confirmed until a few days before. But yeah, with Japan's performance and with all the young stars, and I think the fact that it's a young squad and we really do have the potential to be successful in the Olympics next year and in the upcoming World Cups. I hope that will ensure that the women's football will continue being invested in. But it's also quite likely that many of the players in Japan right now will be moving overseas. So I hope that the WE League will still find a way to stay relevant. I think they do have really good leadership right now. Lots of people who are really passionate about women's football and women empowerment. I think maybe that's the one thing that could hook the audience, that it's obviously the performance on the pitch, but it's also a very, very values-driven league focusing on social values.
And if we just look at the tournament as a whole now to finish off with, you're in Auckland, but when you've been travelling around, when you look at some of the scenes that we've seen across both countries with full stadiums, and particularly here over the last week with Matildas Mania in full swing, what kind of impression has this tournament left on you, and how have you felt, as I said, you've travelled around going to the games and to see women's football in this light?
No, I've been really impressed with the attendances in the stadium. I remember back in the day, there were other countries bidding for this tournament, and one of them was Japan. But now, when I think back, I'm so happy that this tournament went to Australia and New Zealand, because I think these are two nations that are just so hungry for sports and have such a passion for watching sports, consuming sports, and also women's sports in general. It wasn't just the New Zealand Australia games that were packed with fans. I went to Zambia, Japan, and Hamilton, where I wasn't expecting a large crowd, but the tickets were sold out. So I think we also saw it in the Japan-Sweden game, that the stadium was packed, the atmosphere was amazing. The players were saying it was almost like a home game because everyone was chanting, the Japan chants. So I'm really, and I think it's also great that the Matildas have advanced so far, because I can imagine, everyone will be like really trying to get the tickets. So in terms of my experience so far, it's been really positive, and I'm glad it was hosted here.
Well, Shoko, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Enjoy the next few days in Auckland. Hopefully the Matildas get that win over England. Perhaps I'll see you in Sydney in a few days' time in the lead up to the final. But thanks very much for joining us.
Definitely. Fingers crossed for the Matildas.
Well, coming back to you, Adrian, we'll just finish off by talking about that game against England and the opposition. You said that you had a late night. You stayed on to watch the England-Colombia game. What have you made of England so far this tournament, and what kind of challenge will they pose to the Matildas?
Yeah, well, England were very impressive. I saw them live against China, where they completely dominated the game and probably played their best match of the tournament. But I think the performances in and around that match have been a little bit inconsistent. They'll provide a different challenge for Australia because they play with a slightly different formation and structure, and they've got quite a dynamic team that can put other teams under pressure with some pace and power as well. So it'll be a tough challenge for the Matildas, but I think that the way that the Matildas are set up at the moment, they've got some opportunity to absorb some pressure and then cause some problems for England on the counter going the other way.
We know Lauren James is going to be out. She's still serving that 2-game suspension. Who are the other key players then for England that the Matildas will need to try and shut down and be wary of in that game?
Yeah, well, so much of their attack goes through their midfield and also their use of their wide wing backs as well. I've been really impressed with their strikers as well. Russo in particular, I think, has had a really good tournament as well. But there's no doubt that they'll miss Lauren James. That game against China, she was outstanding, and I just loved watching her play. So it's a shame that she's not going to be there, but there'll definitely be some players that will step up in her absence.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot then. Prediction for tomorrow night, Australia against England, of course. What's your prediction? Are the Matildas making it through to the World Cup final?
I'm going to say yes. Yeah, I did a radio interview the other day before the quarter-final against France, and I went with the Matildas then. So I'm going to go back to the well one more time and put my money behind them again.
Yeah. And if they make it, who are they playing?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because the other semi-finals really set up interestingly. You've got two teams who approach football in a very different way. And I'd like to see Spain get in there because I really enjoy the way that they play. But Sweden have been super effective and almost workmanlike, businessmanlike in their performances. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them in there either. The good thing is that it doesn't matter who wins from here, we're going to have a new World Cup champion this year.
Exactly, something we've never seen before. Adrian, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to pick your brain. That is where we will leave things for today. As I said, all our coverage sponsored by our good friends at SMC. We'll be back tomorrow to give a full recap of that match between Australia and England, in which we're hopefully talking about the Matildas making it through to a World Cup final. That's where we will leave things, though. Until I speak to you then, it's bye for now.